Well, this is This Week in Perspective with me, Adam Simbeye. President Jacob Zuma of South Africa is no longer president. I mean, he has actually been, is it overthrown or been ousted, or he was forced to resign. And therefore, South Africa has a new state president in the name of Cyril Ramaphosa, a former anti-apartheid activist and leader of COSATU, another powerful trade union congress of South Africa, particularly in the mining sector, replacing Jacob Zuma, beset throughout his tenure with the corruption and other social scandals. Some commentators have stated that Zuma went through the same door that he came in after Thabo Mbeki. Zuma has been resisting getting out for a while and facing a vote of no confidence, or attempt to have a vote of no confidence, but he survived until finally he resigned on the 14th of February, and Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in as a new president thereafter. First being elected the ANC leader earlier, but he was also vice president of Zuma. Is the new is this a new chapter in South Africa's political history after Mandela? Will politics and status of the economy change for the better under new leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa? Certainly, there will be many lessons to be learned from South Africa. To discuss this actually important subject to us, Tanzania and the rest of Africa, or this development of the powerful financial and economic powerhouse in Africa, with me on the right, Dr. Azaberi Roitama, from the University of Dar es Salaam. Next, Professor Daudi Mukangara, currently still teaching at the University of Dar es Salaam, but a political scientist. Another political scientist on the left is Professor Mwesiga Baregu. They were together at one time. Most are very well known, but he's still there, maybe because of his age.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last but not least is Tony Zakaria, a seasoned journalist and columnist of the Sunday newspaper. Welcome, gentlemen, to the program.
Thank you.
May I apologize to you or to the viewers that, again, I still have a problem of balancing gender. You may ask me why. I can't tell you why, but this has been going on for a while. So we'll wait until 8th of March, International Women's Day, then we'll have an all-women panelist, one man. That will be myself. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let me put the first question to open our discussion. Did it come to you, the four of you, as a surprise that finally President Jacob Zuma has been removed as president after a series of scandals bedeviling his presidency and pressure from ANC? I know both of you political scientists are looking at me. Yeah. Let me start with Professor Barega.
Okay. Well, for me, it didn't come as a surprise at all. I think basically for two reasons. One reason is the kind of options that were facing him. In other words, if he had not decided to resign, he would have been taken to Parliament, and a vote of no confidence would have been held against him. And he would then be in a situation where you're either pushed or you jump. And in this case, he decided to jump.
He went for the better option.
He went for the better option, which was to jump.
At least you know where you're going to fall.
At least you know where you're going to fall. Right? Because if you're pushed, you could fall on your head and get a bad concussion. But there was this example, I think, in the case of Zimbabwe, yes, as well. I think the process that finally removed President Mugabe, I think sent a lesson across the region and hopefully across Africa about longevity in power. You know, how long are you going to stay and still make a positive contribution? But also this looming, almost emerging new energy, the popular demands, because I think even though it was not as explicit in the case of South Africa, but I think what could have happened also would have been a major popular movement, probably, calling for the removal of Zuma. And all this, I think, was not really good for his legacy. And he made, in my view, he made...
if at all he had legacy.
If whatever legacy it may be. Because, well, we're going to find out, because as the new dispensation comes in and the new leaders come in, I think they're going to discover that there is a powerful alliance, maybe of people that supported Zuma. So it's not as if he was alone and nobody, supported him. So I think, on the whole, he made the right decision, and I hope that this sends a lesson to other African leaders, particularly those that are struggling to get a seventh term or a 7-year term, and scrap the life, the age limit. 70, going through a lot of problems trying to stay in power. And I think, in my view, the possibility that Museveni's end could come the same way, I think it's a very big possibility.
Before I come to you, Professor, do you think Zuma's statement that he felt he was being treated unfairly by the ANC throughout the process of removing him, and do you think he forgot what he did to Thabo Mbeki?
No, I don't think he forgot. I think it raises very fundamental questions, actually, about how much Ramaphosa, his successor, is going to be different. Because I think he was judging himself by the standards of the ANC. Like, more or less, comrades, what has gone wrong? We always do these things, and we let so-and-so get away, we let so-and-so also get away. Why me? Why am I being picked on? So I think that the danger thing that he was invoking this to his party. That why are you using a different standard when it's come to me? We have had similar maybe situations. We have handled them probably differently. That worried me, the idea that he felt he was being treated unfairly. Okay. And then I said to myself, it must be unfairly by the ANC's standard.
All right. Professor.
Oh, I agree. Yes, I agree with Professor Baregu. Whether we were surprised by the exit of Zuma at the time he went, no. But he has basically looked at the short-term reasons, and I think that's because he has a presumption that we all know about the long-term reasons. Was the incredibly long list of scandals, including corruption.
I haven't forgotten those.
He assumed we knew that and didn't want to.
No, we'll come. I knew they would come to them. I left them for you.
Now you asked a question towards the end about his condemnation of the ANC and so on, and I want to add this: the ANC itself did not have much of an option. He had to go because it has been declining in popularity. If you look at the electoral performance, it may surprise some people. If you look at electoral performance in terms of statistics, yes. The only time they had an upswing was 1999 and 2004. That's the Thabo Mbeki period. Okay. Since then, there has been a steady decline. You are looking at all elections, national elections, provincial elections, and the municipal elections. I was looking at those sets of data, and it is consistent. The unwavering assault, I'll say assault, by the opposition,
DA.
which is of very young African leaders, you know.
The economic
Malema, Malema, of course, and the DA leader.
The DA as well.
Yes. Very consistently attacking the bad governance of not just Jacob Zuma, but the ANC. For the last 2 years, actually. Very consistent, doing that practically every day. So you had a situation where the ANC self was saying, look, this is it. We have to get rid of the leader. Now, I think even in their calculations, that may not solve all the problems, because the economy itself is not really, you know, in any good shape. It isn't bad, but it is not a very good shape. But at least start with this one. I also want to add, in terms of their political culture, if there is a change of leadership at the party and there is a new leader in the party, in this case Cyril Ramaphosa, it seems to me that it is their culture that would be the president.
Okay, once you elected.
Yes, once you have the president of the
party,
ANC, yes, it seems to me that then the political culture dictates that would be the leader.
Is this typical? Not typical of many.
It is typical of
in
many.
Africa?
It is typical of many, not just Africa,
not all of them.
but not all of them.
Not all
Yeah,
of
I
them.
agree. But it is for many political parties, not just in Africa, but elsewhere as well.
Yeah, but
Okay.
let me say, you know, but I don't know the extent to which in this country, for example, that is political parties. I know for certain that in my
It's not
political party,
Chanema's.
no, it's not. You know, the best candidate runs for office.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Can I turn to you, Dr.
Yes,
Rostam, and then I'll come to
I think maybe if we can pick up on this one, on the political culture and the political practice and the governing, legal system and constitutional setting, which permits the kind of situations that we have seen happen in South Africa and to some smaller extent in Zimbabwe, is that first of all, the South African case is where you really actually choose a party. You don't choose an individual.
Yes.
And that's why it was possible that once there was political discontent within the ANC at Polokwane, Mbeki was seen to be lukewarm and to be
Too close to
too moderate, too neo-colonial, and Zuma was seen to be a radical, more likely to support the aspirations of the people who had fought in the Liberation War. He was too academic. He was too much like Mzee Madiba, too sort of compromising, giving too many concessions to the whites, etc., etc. You see, that was Polokwane. That was how Mbeki was removed, And then all these aspirations were pinned on these gentlemen who had been in the Umkhonto we Sizwe, the veterans, the people who actually, put their life on line for the independence of the country. And then what turned out? This same person, sort of made these, colleagues in the party disappointed. And then they had also a constituency out there where you have these provincial elections, you have got municipal elections, you had most of the bigger cities, taken over by the opposition. So, and unfortunately for the ANC, and for Zuma, the constitution in South Africa does not give the president, if you like, sultanate imperial powers. In the case of South Africa, in the case of the ANC, the constitution they are operating in does not allow the president to once you are president, I'm just referring to what you were saying about
president of the party or president
if
of
you are president of the country, then you can always make sure, you know, that there is nobody who is going to vote against you in the party. But in the case of South Africa, you may be president like Mbeki was, you know, and then people may remove you from the presidents of the party.
In
you know?
parliament?
Yeah, no, in the party. You know, I mean, the party is so powerful that the party is above the presidency, you know, the state presidency, okay? I mean, you know, Mbeki was president, but he was removed, you know, I mean, by the party, you know, because the party was more powerful than...
Dr.
Yeah.
To be fair, isn't that emphasized in their own constitution, where the South Africans don't elect an individual, they elect as a party. Then it's the leader of the party who becomes president. Is that not correct, political scientists?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I was agreeing with them, but I was saying there is a nuance here, you know. I mean, here, once you take state power, you know, you remember Mutharika in Malawi, you can actually dismiss the party which on whose ticket you became president. You know, because you have so much power, which means if you had a constitution like the one we have here, or the one that Mutharika was operating in Malawi, when these guys started threatening, you know, he could have said, well, I'm the president here. I mean, you know, so you can't remove me.
Can go to hell with the
and I don't think the party, when it met and then elected Ramaphosa instead of the former wife of Nkosazana, okay? I mean, you know, which means at that level you can see the party was more powerful than the presidency. Okay, the president wanted his former wife to be the president of ANC. It didn't happen. Instead, a rival was elected. So at that point, you could see the constitution of South Africa creates a possibility for greater democracy within the party. You know, that the party in power. I mean, you know, because if the party once the party is in power, the presidency could very easily subordinate the party. To the presidency. But in the case of South Africa, you can't do that.
Okay. But in theory, I don't think this is necessarily a function of the constitution of the ANC. It has also got to do with the strength of the people in the, say, in the Central Committee, in the National Executive Committee. It has also a lot to do with the factions, the different groups within the party. And this is the point that we were making about whether or not he had any options, given the capacity of the party to intervene, and given the strength, because what was weighed out, because it's partly the strength of the factions that support Zuma versus those that do not necessarily support Zuma.
But the point I'm stressing is that the state constitution, not the constitution of the ANC, the state constitution in South Africa allows greater freedom and autonomy to institutions, including those factions within those parties. Okay, because in our own situations, or in the case of Malawi, I mean, once you see factions, you use state power to suffocate everybody. Okay, but you can't do that in South Africa. You know?
All right. Let's hear now from Tony Zakaria. Either it's a journalistic point of view or a general point of view as a columnist.
Right. Zuma, for me, is the cat with 9 legs, the political cat who survived every scandal. In many countries in the world, just being accused of rape, he had a case of rape, is enough to get you out of office. In America, in Britain, but he went on and contested his presidency a second time and won.
Yes. Got married to 4 wives.
Yeah, and he's still married to a number of wives. In many countries, when you use state funds clearly and for personal gain, and there is evidence, possibility of your party agreeing to go with you because you taint everybody. But he was still there. Zuma presided over South Africa, which had a strong economy. Yes. It was #1 for a long time. And in Zuma's time, it went to #2. Now, when I was working for the UN in Pakistan, we had this joke that Pakistan, Nigeria, and Bangladesh were the 3 top most corrupt countries at that time. And every year, they would either it would be Nigeria or, or
competing
Pakistan
among
or,
themselves.
Yeah. So that year, Pakistan became #1. And the Pakistanis were saying, you know, I think the Pakistanis have bribed the Nigerians in order for them to be #1. Yeah. Zuma has survived where anybody else would have failed. So I don't think scandals were enough. I think there came a time when political expediency was used. He had to go or the party was going to die. Whatever the reason. And I asked myself, fine, he left, the party elected a new ANC leader, president. What if they had elected Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma? Would they have pressured Zuma in January or February to leave office? Or was this one of those gender issues even America is grappling with, that it's difficult for a woman to ascend to the topmost position? Remember, if you look at the votes when they had the ANC meeting, it went on into midnight, and it was an even split. The victory of Cyril Ramaphosa wasn't that great.
No.
But he won. Now, had
Zuma.
yeah, Dlamini Zuma won. Would they say now that he's president, she is president of ANC, husband down, it's time for your wife to ascend to the throne? I don't know.
You know, you can't.
We are talking about the strength of institutions. Working for the UN, the one thing I learned, institutions may have systems, institutions may have constituencies, but eventually what makes a difference are individuals.
There are people there.
The people who are in. And that's why you have this political basis. I can tell you South Africa is going to go through a period of, I don't know if it's going to be quiet or it's going to be open.
All right. Well, very quickly then, Professor Mukangara, do you think this change of guard from Zuma to Ramaphosa and will come the tension, the struggles, the fights within the ANC, the factions within the ANC?
Yes, and the question you are asking is internal to the ANC. Okay. Yes, it will, in my opinion, for a while. Professor Baregu talked about factions, and factions do not have short lives. So there might come a time when, in fact, another upheaval within the party erupts vis-a-vis Ramaphosa, who, by the way, doesn't have a very good record himself in terms of good governance as such. He used to have, I think, when he was still a fighter for workers' rights in Kosatu, did a good job in the negotiations in Kodesa. Soon after, Nelson Mandela came out of prison. And did a good job as well during the transition.
The Constitution.
Yes, the Constitution as well. You know, after that, you know, as you know, he went to the bourgeoisie. That's your word.
He joined them.
He joined them.
Club.
And of
He
course
wanted political office. And Mandela bypassed him for the vice presidency.
Yes, and of course many of you will remember the terrible Marikana incident,
Yes.
that massacre in that private mining company, where he was a prominent leader, and they massacred these workers for just protesting for their rights and so on. He apologized, and I suppose that a big section of the South Africans have excused him for that particular infringement, but I think that remains a very bad mark on his. And in terms of ideological standing, I can't really place him anywhere, really. Maybe some kind of centrist, you know, really not very much different from Zuma. Not very much different from Zuma. It hasn't been tainted with accusations, I say accusations, of corruption, you know, but maybe because we don't know yet, or he hasn't had the opportunity.
But his first priority when he made his statement after being elected president by Parliament.
By Parliament, yeah.
That is one of the top priority actions will be to fight corruption. Now, do you think he will succeed?
Well, I think,
to,
you know...
To go with that, if you may, do you think Ramaphosa will try and bring a change in the governance issue, which Professor...
I think the point that Dawoodi just broached, there are two Ramaphosas, or two faces of Ramaphosa. When I first met him in 1985, I was a graduate student in the United States, and he came on a tour of the United States, which is normally organized by the CIA. And we managed to capture him. I was then president of the African Association at Stanford University. And we kept him overnight. We talked to him. He was then in COSATU. And he was really doing a wonderful job. And we were trying to tell him that he should try and, much as possible, align the activities of COSATU with the activities of the ANC so that they are not used against each other. That was the Ramaphosa I knew at that time. This is now a different Ramaphosa. This is a multi-billion. This is a billionaire.
Multi-billionaire.
Multi-billionaire. And if you listen to Julius Malema, I mean, from Julius Malema's point of view, he's not different. And the people have been saying, including the DA leadership, who said that
DA means Democratic Alliance.
Democratic Alliance leadership, whom I think you have already mentioned, who said that there was not, as far as he was concerned, there was not a Zuma problem. There was an ANC problem in South Africa. And therefore it looks to me that the chances that Ramaphosa may embark upon in a major transformation, a lot of things that don't forget that Ramaphosa has been more or less hothouse prepared. He has been, he's a product of Black Empowerment Program, the BEE, Black Economic Empowerment, and that program was intended to create a stake among a few blacks.
But he was not the only one.
In monopoly capital, I know, but it's a group. It's a small group, but it's part of what has obstructed the transformation.
Yes.
The transformations that we anticipated to come from the Freedom Charter, which, by the way, the charter, I agree, was signed in Morogoro, in Tanzania, I think in 1956 or something like that. So all those promises, and particularly the land question in South Africa, I don't know whether he's even going to try and touch it, and if he does touch it, whether it will be consistent with some of the demands being made by Julius Malema and the Economic Liberation Front. So I think he has his challenges cut out for him, and I do not see myself whether he really has that much space to be able to address these long awaited problems that have been, So, as I think Dawoodi says, he can't place him. Well, if he can't place him ideologically, then I also find it difficult to place him politically.
How about economically? How about economically?
Economically, they say, and I think they're quite right, he belongs to the white monopoly capital. He's a captive of white monopoly capital now. And very well invested across the region, by the way. It's not just in South Africa. I think it's not less than 20 companies.
His company.
In which he has a stake. And the business is not just in South Africa. You talk about the DRC, the whole mining conglomerates.
Don't you think, Professor, I'll come back to you, that being a multi-billionaire and having all these investment everywhere and being on the side of the wise in terms of the economic mainstay, we give him an opportunity to say, well, I've amassed enough, I've got enough, I don't have to bother about this, let me look at the interests of the downtrodden.
I think, Daudi, we can go back. Remember Karl Marx's idea about capital and the capitalist. And then that capital is always telling the capitalist, whispering, go on, more. so I don't see any miracles. And given what we know from the past, it would be ridiculous to expect
just
that.
a little rejoinder to this. And this, I think, is something that can be said by all of us in relation to our people who become suddenly very rich. A little like the oligarchy of Russia. Cyril Ramaphosa represents that. I began to hear about him being a multi-billionaire within 5 years of his leaving government. Now, how does that happen unless you have really looted the state coffers? How does that happen? I mean, you have probably cooperated with others in government to do precisely that. So to me, that suspicion always remains that this is not going to be the leader of an anti-corruption move. Let me just also say, perhaps again as a rejoinder to what Baregu said in relation to Malema's statement, the problem is not Zuma, it is the ANC. Now, I'm very much a supporter of the ANC myself, but I would agree with this to a great extent, because the greatest scandals of corruption are two in South Africa. The arms deal, which jailed a friend of Zuma,
plus with
and the oil gate.
But with Zuma, in his 9 lives, he survived.
Now, those two major scandals are not Zuma's scandals, they are ANC scandals.
Is that so?
Yes, so it is important to know this.
But that's why I thought, Professor Baregi, when he said that there are two Ramaphosas, I thought they are the same people, I mean, because the one you met in the United States, you quite rightly said was sponsored by the CIA. So even at that time, even at that time, remember, Ramaphosa was never a member of Umkhonto we Sizwe. Was never a member of the upper echelons of the liberation movement. Unlike Zuma. So in a way, what I'm saying is that maybe the capitalist system, remember, maybe we have forgotten that the capitalist system is in a crisis.
Zuma is the last of that generation, by the way.
Yeah, so the capitalist system had already started to look within the labor aristocracy, recruits, and they found a good recruit. Now this recruit is going to have the support of global capital. Because he had already been with them for a long time.
And he was set up by white monopoly capital.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that he's going to, in the short term, at least is going to create some confidence within the capitalist class. That at least there is on the levers, there are hands we can trust.
Ultimately will improve the economic performance.
In the short term. But the trouble is, this is the trouble, and this is the trouble of the crisis of former liberation movements turned party states, state parties, because they have all these from, the Freedom Charter or even in other places, as Miora, Arusha, etc., they have all this baggage of promises they've made to the people who were actually doing the liberation war, which they can't keep. But on the other hand, now they want to play safe with the capitalists. So Zuma remember when Zuma removed Mbeki, he had the greatest support of the Communist Party of South Africa, because they thought, after all, he had been a member for a long time of the Communist Party of South Africa, And then he turned into also wanting to be like Ramaphosa, So all I'm saying is this is a crisis of the liberation movement turned political parties. You see it in everywhere. In Zimbabwe, in Uganda, in everywhere. So the outcome, all I'm saying is that this crisis is going, in the short term, the capitalists are happy there is Ramaphosa. In the short term, the ANC, unfortunately for the ANC, the South African constitution is not like the other constitutions elsewhere, that they can use state parties to perpetuate themselves as a party. So they have to, that's why they had to breathe hard on Zuma to give, because they have a constituency among ordinary people, ordinary peasants out there who still have hopes with the ANC, okay? But obviously, at the end of the day, the ANC saw that they are likely to constantly be pushed. Now they are already almost pushed out of major cities, but they still have the countryside. So they risked losing the countryside, and that's why they had to push Zuma, okay? So, you know, the outcome is that maybe the ANC is given some space. How they use it?
For a short while.
Yes. Now, Tony, I was going to also add to what you're going to comment on all this. So, do you think, or you don't think this will happen, that Ramaphosa's new administration will certainly go a long way to calm the tensions in the ANC and bring all those factions together and bring ANC back to its popularity during Mandela's time?
I don't know if ANC needs popularity right now. I think ANC is in trouble. And in politics, nothing is certain except change. They will find a way to change so that they can remain where they are. Or
survive, just for survival. Survival
is a good word. But going back to the question you had asked earlier, and I'll come back to this after a while. I am a son of a peasant, and I grew up in Nyerere's time when, through his beliefs and his lifestyle,
there's no assumption that the four of us here are not sons of peasants. Professor,
I need to hear you state it.
We are.
Oh, be sure.
So,
but even Zuma was the son of a peasant, so you can't.
Why am I saying this?
Okay.
Cyril Ramaphosa, from when he was in Kosato, I don't know where he came from before. He was traveling first class. He believes in good life. Okay?
Yeah.
And perhaps he believed that if he had gone high to become Mandela's deputy, he would have that life, if that was the life that was enjoyed by the Boers when they were in power. When he didn't have it, he went and found it. And he worked hard, whatever he did, he got there. He is a good spender. He likes fast car, expensive cars, he likes wine, he has a...
And women.
That's much.
He's a man.
We're not sure.
He's a man. So he is worth millions or billions, you said?
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa bid for a bull, one bull and one calf. And he was ready to pay almost 20 million rand. That's like $1 million. Or 2 million.
For each or
2
for
million
both of them?
For both of them. But these are two cows, a big one and a small one. In a country where there are many, many poor people. If you go to Johannesburg, you go to Cape Town, in town.
What was the purpose?
We are not going.
What was the purpose for buying these?
The bull.
Yeah.
I think he has a ranch. He keeps cattle.
Oh, I see. So this was a breeding thing. I see. It wasn't like a church contribution.
No.
Well,
it wasn't fundraising for charity.
For charity.
He wanted it for himself.
Okay.
But somebody else.
Of course, these cows were on auction.
Well, they are on auction. Somebody else outbid him. He went to 20 million. So he said, "That's it." But so, what kind of change would I expect from this person? And I'm thinking the change that you need is a change that will bring economic and social empowerment to the majority of South Africans, who after 24 years of independence, they are disillusioned. The reason why ANC is having problems is because people are disillusioned. They thought, we will remove the Boers, we will now be the rulers, and it will be a land of milk and honey. And it is never like that. You can promise, but no politician has been able to deliver that land of milk and honey. Will Cyril Ramaphosa bring this change? I don't know. Does he have an inclination? Does he have a history? Does he have proclamations? Has he published anything to say where he wants to go?
No.
So I am quite uncertain.
But you're not ruling him out together, are you?
Oh, in politics, as I said, everything is possible.
Everything is possible. Okay. You have answered the question of corruption as one of his priorities.
But I was going to say a little bit about corruption. You see, the capitalist system, you know, is by definition capable of passing something as okay and another thing as not okay. Okay, because you know, I mean, all this money which is put aside for lubricating the wheels of industry, etc. What is it? I mean, but what they are worried about usually, when the global capitalist, when he talks about corruption, he talks about when you want to take land in Tanzania, you don't get to go through, you know, all kinds of ways, you know, and then get all these petty, you know, little officials who get in the way. Okay, so if you have you know, someone who you come one stop, you get your land, you do what you want, and then if the workers cause trouble, you one stop, you know, the workers are removed, then there is no corruption in the country. So, I mean, one has to be very careful when you are talking about corruption and you are talking about capitalism. Because show me a capitalist system which does not thrive on double standards. Okay? So, I mean, so when they are worried about capitalism, be careful what they are worried about. They are not necessarily worried about, you know, little petty, you know, thievery and petty little things which are done by officials against ordinary people.
Okay, no double standard in socialism as against capitalism?
Well, if you ask me, I have never seen a socialist system working, so I don't know.
I think that's a separate debate. You know, let me just say about the incubation of Ramaphosa, the making of Ramaphosa. What is believed, I think, by many in South Africa is that the people who captured Mandela, and Mandela, basically, you're talking about Oppenheimer and all these people who captured Mandela, and in the meantime, prepared Ramaphosa, knowing that Mandela was not going to be lasting for a long time. So Mandela and, you know, the Mandela out of Robben Island and Ramaphosa basically were made in the same stable, which is White Monopoly Capital stable. To think that he's going to be different, but they're talking about corruption, the money spent into the British, economic black empowerment, black economic empowerment program. Again, you know, it's like you buy people off with shares in companies, etc., etc., and that's basically how Ramaphosa was made.
All right. We'll go to the last question about South Africa in a few minutes, but for now, another 5 minutes. Let us see what has happened in Ethiopia, another big and large country, where the Prime Minister resigned. Do you think political resignations are anything about another important happening in Africa, the resignation of Ethiopia Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn? And was this a surprise to you as well? I mean, why did he resign?
I'm also keen to hear what the political scientists are saying.
No, this is just personal. You know, for me it was a surprise because I wasn't listening to the news about Ethiopia a lot. I know that there were a series of protests.
Yes.
About bad governance.
For almost a year.
Yes, for almost a year. That I know. And so perhaps it is that he just felt, you know, this pressure is a lot of it, you know, and resigned. You know, they have declared the state of emergency now, the new leaders.
Will last for 6 months.
Yes, which will last for 6 months. So maybe something like that. I don't know, the others may have better details.
Well, I think you're right, but that there was this pressure which had built up. And of course it has to do again with the kind of ethnic factions you have in Ethiopia. And you know, Ethiopia was just put together, you know, in the emperor's period. It's like all these, it's like a loose confederal Ethiopia, which could really fall apart any time. But I think what brought this up we have not referred to the so-called Arab Spring, which blew across that northern part of Africa at some point and then went away, never really crossed southwards. And I think what happened in Ethiopia, in a way, if one were to, because the whole Arab Spring thing is complicated as well, but the mass movement, mass pressure, the people's action. And I have a feeling that there is probably a resurgence of this kind of pressure from below, people demanding change. To some extent, we saw that in Zimbabwe. I think in the background of what's happening in South Africa, there is that kind of popular discontent expressing itself on the streets. So what happened this is what overwhelmed the Stalin. He just, he's an academic, by the way. He's not really a conventional politician. So academics tend to have very thin skins. We are really, you can only take so much pressure because
actually,
you can work
right,
more effectively.
Because I know that this, remember, the end of this
yes.
liberation movement turned political party, okay? And then when he left, again, because of this, this Museveni of a FAWEC factor of making sure nobody around you, other than sycophants, then when he left, suddenly this technocrat took over. So again, you are quite right to link what has happened in Ethiopia to what has happened in South Africa, because again, this particular leader who has resigned not partly because of the pressure from outside, not necessarily in the case of South Africa, pressure from the townships and so on and all the political parties against the ANC and so on. But in the case of Ethiopia, this small clique, which, with the Zenawi, they could survive by all kinds of tricks, Machiavellian tricks. This particular individual couldn't play those kind of tricks, but also within that party, there was also pressure to ease him out. Because he was not necessarily the one they had wanted initially when Zenawi left.
In the case of Ethiopia, though, it's almost a 1 year of persistent pushing by the people themselves.
But before that,
so whatever designs may have been taking place within the EPRDF, I don't think it. He was.
You are quite right. What I'm saying is that the context. In the case of Ethiopia, it is not the constitution. It is the struggles of the people on the ground, which has forced this clique to say we had better force this fellow to go because he's too weak.
We will see.
He's too like Mbeki. If you like, this guy was like Mbeki.
We will see how the clique fares
Incidentally,
in the wake of this.
I think I like the highlight you made of the, if you call it, ethnic calm nationality divisions in Ethiopia that are unique. In this pressure, in this 1 year pressure that Baregu is talking about, the Oromo nationality is quite central.
And it's the majority, by the way. They are over 50% of the population in Ethiopia.
The Amharas dominate Addis Ababa.
And yet the clique is Tigray.
They are a small minority.
This clique is Tigray, so it's
It's a green.
What has his resignation got to do with the recent decision by the nation to release political prisoners? Right?
Political prisoners.
Well, it's a big change because I don't know any country in Africa which has decided, okay, we are closing and letting everybody go. It's like we were wrong to put them in the first place.
Yeah. It's an attempt.
And I can see if I was sitting on the table and maybe I was part of the decision making, where we say these people are breaking the law, let's bring them in. And then you say, okay, I think the pressure is too much, international as well as national. We will ease the pressure and we can go back to living a good life with our donors, etc. if we do this action. And there is a strategic reason why they would release political prisoners.
Yeah, but unfortunately it's too little, too late.
Do you think, very quickly, his resignation will go a long way to solve these perennial political problems in Ethiopia?
I think Ethiopia will probably plunge into a certain uncertain transition, and I think it's very difficult to predict which way it's going to go.
No, the last question in the next 10 minutes. I'll start the go round. So, if there are any, what will be the challenges that new President Ramaphosa will face as president and leader of the ANC, particularly as the country is gearing for elections general elections in 2019? And what should South Africans and to a large extent Africa expect from his presidency? Very quickly.
Number one, for South Africa, I think the ANC is going to face an uphill task of meeting the expectations that are generated by removing Zuma. You know, because all the things we have said, Ramaphosa doesn't look like he's going to do any more than please the international capital. As for lessons for Africa, I think the key is that I think there is a crisis of liberation movements, whether long-term ones like the ANC or newer ones like the one in Ethiopia, that they came on the scene with an agenda which was appealing. And then the leadership, either through dictatorship or in the case of South Africa through quote-unquote corruption and ignoring the masses and their aspirations, then they create room for these parties to begin to be doubted. And that, you know, for me now, you know, that's a good thing for Africa, you know, because, you know, these political parties which bring a liberation of one level, once they finish their job, they tend to become a fetter. They become a problem. You know, I mean, they need to be removed so that people can move on.
All right, Professor.
You know, somebody somewhere said, you know, it's the economy, stupid. And I think, you know, what they meant was, okay, all the other things may be important, but in the final analysis, you must look at that. Now, if you look at the post-apartheid economy of South Africa, it hasn't done too badly. In fact, it looks like the post-apartheid period did free up quite a lot of developmental channels. And in terms of the GDP, there was quite a lot of growth, more than fourfold, as it were. However, it seems to have stagnated now, and in particular, GDP per capita. You know, the perennial question we ask in all these countries, if you tell us, you know, we are growing at 7%, and the people around you, the poor people around you said, well, we don't see it because it looks like my economic situation as an individual is getting worse. Well, they are grappling with the same problem in South Africa.
And do you think
they are battling unemployment for an industrial state, because I think it is industrial, largely industrial. There is a 25% unemployment rate as we speak. You know, and in terms of annual growth, while in some other states we are boasting of 6 to 7% growth, they've gone down to 3.5% and probably still going further down. Now, usually in an economy like that, which is developing, it should be around the 6-7% mark, but it is quite low. So that's a lot of challenge. That's a lot of work cut out.
So it's the economy, stupid,
yes,
which is likely to be the biggest challenge for Ramaphosa.
Yes.
Professor Monsigo Baregu.
Well,
quickly.
Add to that that he has an election coming up next year, and the election, of course, has to be won by the party, because the president finally does not run as himself. He is only elected by parliament, and that depends on whether we will have a majority in the parliament to be able to obtain enough votes to vote him in now for his own term. And it looks to me that's going to be a very, very, very uphill struggle.
So it's a bigger challenge.
And that is probably going also to depend on the extent to which Julius Malema and his company, to what extent can they form a viable alliance between the DA and the other, and the EFF, to be able to create a momentum that would probably capture them enough votes, either to block the election of Ramaphosa, or to create some kind of crisis in the parliament when the presidency comes on the floor of parliament.
Okay, that's a bigger challenge. Yes, Tony, quickly.
Cyril Ramaphosa is a member of the rich club, so I'm sure businesses are happy, business owners are happy, and perhaps because of that, because of his own dealings, he's going to facilitate South African companies to expand into more markets in Africa. I think that's an area where maybe Zuma may have failed. So his main challenge is empowering the majority of the people economically. As you know, South Africa, I think, has the most billionaires in Africa on the Forbes list.
Surpassing Nigeria?
Well, yeah, I think on the top 50, you have more South Africans than you have Nigerians.
All right.
Ordinary...
Although with international, I mean, these days it's very difficult to locate capital, and it's multinational
Yes.
ownership. It's a bit...
So I feel for South Africans, because when you don't even have land, many of those are technically more poor than ordinary Tanzanians. And yet, it is the number 2 economy in Africa.
Yeah.
So the action of Nelson Mandela after he came out and took government, appointing people like Jay Nairo to look after the urbanization and the provision of houses to the downtrodden, doesn't seem to have picked up, and it seems to have died. Maybe it's natural death because people still live in shacks. All right?
Maybe Nairo was the one with the heart for it.
Yes.
As I said before, individuals do make a difference.
Yeah.
Don't forget that South Africa tried a whole number of, including gear. They had so many, of these kinds of programs that were designed to bring about fundamental transformations in the economy, and transformation that would actually affect the lives of ordinary people. Nothing has seemed to work at all.
All right.
So we either wait for something to happen in South Africa, because I don't think that they are going to be able to afford, as I say, even the poorest of the poor. You're more likely to find them in South Africa than you are to find them here. The only difference that in South Africa, when that happens, because it's urbanized, etc., here people can work out a living on your land, etc. But there it's so stark that one expects that somehow it will blow up.
No space to have a little garden for your mchicha and everything.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, my panelists, thank you very much for your analysis of the situation. I mean, we had to discuss these things, and your analysis is very important because, as the four of you said, South Africa is a very important country. For us, particularly Tanzania, as a member of SADC, and being an economic powerhouse, I don't know whether it is still an economic powerhouse, being run by the oldest African political party, ANC,
100 years.
Yeah, 100 years. So we are beneficiary to the South African independence and the fight against apartheid. Let's hope things will change for the better in South Africa, because otherwise we will all be affected somehow. Finally, viewers, President Jacob Zuma is no longer South Africa's state president after Thabo Mbeki. He bowed out on the 14th of February after pressure from his own party, the ANC, which he described as being unfair to him, and we heard my panelists here analyze that. A former anti-apartheid leader and leader of the powerful Congress of South African Trade Unions, Cyril Ramaphosa, 65 years old, who earlier was elected the leader of the ANC and was vice president to Zuma actually, took over on Thursday the 15th, and so by the parliament in Cape Town. A South African journalist by the name of Jason Book, writing in the South African Guardian, said, Zuma's departure ends South Africa's most troubled period since apartheid. Well, my panelists here will agree or disagree. The new president, Ramaphosa, has put the fight against corruption as one of his top priorities. Well, you heard what will happen and whether he will succeed or not. Our local political commentators in Tanzania have reacted positively to the resignation of Jacob Zuma in less than 3 months after, as you read from Professor Baregu, after Robert Mugabe, saying the trend means citizens now exercise their power against leaders they deem errant. Now, that's a very important point. Is this indeed the trend in Africa? I wonder. Let us wait and see if similar political developments will emerge elsewhere in the country. That's all we have for you viewers. Until next Sunday at 21 hours and on Thursday at 15 hours for the repeat program. On behalf of my panel, Dr. Loitama, Professor Laoli Mukangara, Professor Mwesiga Baregu, Tony Zakaria, and my TBC Television Center crew. Thank you viewers and goodbye.